Order. This is a meeting of the Pleasant Grove City Council as a work session. We welcome all those who have joined us this evening and staff also. Been a busy day today, but we'd like to start off with Captain Roberts. If he'd come forward and brief us on what's been going on in Councilman Jensen's neighborhood today. All his fault, too.
Long story short, there's the residence that's just behind John Hancock School. We've been trying to get a hold of the owner of that residence for well over a year for some zoning issues and zoning problems. And we haven't been able to do so. We've tried to send some administrative citations, and they've all come back in the mail. So we've never been able to get a hold of the guy. And we couldn't find any family. We still can't. No close family or relatives or anybody. And so we've kind of struggled. Well, there's a group of people that had like a 5% interest. I don't exactly know how it works in the property that hasn't been able to access the property for some time. They got a court order this morning to be able to access the property, so they contacted us and asked us to come with them and just kind of stand by, because we've always assumed that he may be in there and be dead, but we've never had an opportunity to go in there. Obviously we can't just go in the house, and there's been a history there at that house. We've had the SWAT team there a couple times, and threats. And one of the actual threats was to trap some doors in his house with bombs. So we respond up there. They make entry in the house. He is in the house, and he's dead. And we can see him through a window of another room. But there are wires and all sorts of knickknacks, I guess you could say, that are associated with improvised explosive devices. So we immediately backed out of the house, set up a perimeter, contacted BOD, which is the bomb squad. They came out. We evacuated John Hancock School and basically the entire block surrounding that residence, safety reasons obviously. And the person was a hoarder, so the house is so cluttered that the bomb squad couldn't get the robot in there, so they had to come up with some different means to try to do it. They used some of their explosives on what they thought were explosives, and it turned out that there weren't any. There were parts that to appear that he had been tinkering with, trying to make some bombs, but there were no actually explosive devices in the residence. So at that point, we allowed everybody to come back, close the evacuation, and just went through with a suspicious death investigation. And well, the body's been in there for easily a year, so I mean, it's going to take DNA and dental records and stuff to even identify. And we have no family to contact. I mean, nobody. We found an ex-wife who divorced him 14 years ago, and she didn't want anything to do with it. So we're still in the process of that, but we'll work with the medical examiner's office to figure it out. Me too. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Chief. Doing a great job there on home teaching there.
Do what I can.
Councilman Jensen.
I tried to call Jacob, but he wouldn't go with me. But, that was during my time. Yeah.
So, okay. Scott, we'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you. On your agenda, we're going to take item number 1 and move that to number 3. Our first item of business will be to hear from Republic Services. We've talked briefly in the past with some changes in the world of recycling really globally that's affected not just Pleasant Grove, but people that have been participating in recycling, and how that is affecting what could potentially affect as we move forward, what our program looks like and how much we're going to be charged and things like that. So we've asked Reese DeMille from Republic Services to come and kind of give us the status of recycling, kind of what's happening in the nation, and then we'll need to talk about some potential solutions moving forward. I have pulled our agreement. Our agreement runs through June 30th of 2020. So there's another just over, just under 2 years left on the agreement that we have regarding this service. So, but with that, I'll turn it over to Reese.
Scott, you all should have, and Scott, I put one on your desk. I don't know if you got it, but you all should have a paper that looks something like this. I just put something together for you to look at a little bit. So just kind of by way of history, the world of recycling has changed. And, you know, over half of all recycling product in the world goes to China. And they decided 2 or 3 years ago that they were not going to be the drop-off for all of the world's garbage that comes with recycling, so the contamination. So I won't give you all the details, but it started with the green fence, then it went to the green sword about a year or so ago, and essentially they're saying, we're just not going to take people's recycling because we're having to landfill all of their contamination. So they made a law that they first started checking them at the border, the containers that go over there, and if they had any contamination, they would send them back. Well, that became so expensive for people sending containers over. Then and I can't remember the acronym, but they actually have officials here in the United States at the ports now that check those containers before they even go to China. And so we're at least saving some money not having to send it to China and back, but they're still saying nope. And at first they said it can be like 0.3% contamination. Well, that's like, you know, one pizza box in a load. That's not going to work. And so they've backed off a little bit of that, and now it's 0.8 or something like that % contamination that can be in the loads. Well, it's almost can't happen. So they've just pretty much backed off, and they just won't buy recyclables right now. So in the industry, and in your city we just do the collection, but countrywide, Public Services does, you know, we have a materials recovery facility, and we're trying to sell this, and so it you know, countrywide we're dealing with all sorts of issues. Here, just collection. But we're trying to find different manufacturers, end users in Indonesia and South Korea and the Philippines and Vietnam and other places that will do that. But it's a slow process, and they're buying some of it, but you can just imagine all of the world's recycling, or half the world's recycling, going to China, and all of a sudden they say they're not going to take anymore. And so it's just caused a huge issue. And it's not a Republic issue. This is a worldwide, every company issue. So what I did was our contract, July, Scott mentioned our contract is up June 30th, 2020. So what I did was I took from July 1st, 2015, and I just put a little table there to show you what the commodity prices were when we extended our contract. So we looked at what those commodity prices were, and we said, we're not getting anything. We may get $5, but we may lose $5. But on average, when we came to you for an extension, we figured it would be about zero. We weren't going to get anything. We weren't going to lose anything. Well, that was in the middle of 2015. You can see what the prices have been that we've been paying for tipping fees since then. So in 2016, it was, averaged $29 a ton. In 17-16, we thought it was kind of coming back, and then the green sword really went into effect, and so now we're at $65 a ton to drop that off. And that's a huge cost for us. We did not anticipate that at all. We would have tried to work with you on the extension on a pricing or some sort of relief if we known that we were going to have to pay disposal to that extent. And like I said, I wasn't in here 2 years ago because we felt like it's going to rebound a little bit, and it kind of did in 2017. But now, calamity of it, it's where we don't feel like there's going to be any big relief anytime soon. We don't know what it's going to do. Right now, everybody's kind of scrambling. So that's the facts on the monthly totals and what that. So it's averaging 57 a ton right now. If you trend that out at $65 a ton for the next 4 months, it trends out to be $59 a ton. You did 870 tons in 2017, so if you take that times the $59 a ton, it's a little over $51,000. So then I just did a little calculation and putting on there, that's what we charge you, the $520 per can, the $343 for the second container or an additional container, and then the $479 for the recycling program. So if you were to say, well, we will pay for this tipping fee, all of the tipping fee, it would be 59 cents per home per month for everybody that's in your city. Well, then you say, well, we're not going to charge people that aren't recycling to pay for the recycling. So then it would be just the recycling homes, it would be 88 cents per month per home to cover that $59. Now it's $65, but let's just use what it is in 2018. So I am here just to ask what you can help with, if anything.
I have a question. So in June of 2020, we're going to have a decision anyway to make. You're going to come to us and say your contract's up, right?
We'll do that next year, but yes.
Yeah. And let's just say the current trend stays the way it is, right? It doesn't make sense for you to stay in that business. So it puts somewhat of a pressure on us as a city, PR, right? Marketing to say, hey, citizens, this is what the reality is now, right? If you want to stay in it, this is what the costs are. If you don't, it is what it is. And so,
right.
Yeah, it'll just be kind of, it's hard on the city side, I think, right? As far as marketing this out to the citizens and saying this is why we're having this issue, because a lot of people are invested in recycling, right? Love it. And so it's kind of hard for I'm just trying to think of a citizen, right, that says, why are you getting out of the recycling, right, business? And even though we try to explain the costs, what does that really mean to them? And what does it mean to the city? Because if we have to go to the citizens and say, hey, we're gonna stop recycling, but if you want to get back in, here's the cost, right? I mean, that's what we're up against here, really, in a year when it comes to this.
I think the hard thing, the hard thing here is that let's say this was completely reversed, and instead of minus 57, it was plus 57. You wouldn't come to us. We couldn't come to you. And so while this is a worldwide problem, we really need to recycle. We got to figure this out. It creates a business opportunity really for somebody to try to figure out how they make recycling manageable and cost effective. I don't think this is something we can solve in a 30-minute work session. But what have other cities done? What have you, as you've gone to other cities or even other states? What is the there's a bigger problem here, right, on recycling. What have they done, and what can we do to help?
So to your first comment, we did have cities come back to us and say, we want to split the recycling. We know that you guys are getting $30 a ton or $20 a ton or whatever it is. We want to split that with you. So that has been said in the past. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's been many years since there was a substantial rebate on recycling, though. It's all across the board. So Boise, for instance, we pick up all of the whole county where Boise is. And they just implemented a $1.23 increase to all their residents. Now they have required recycling, and they just said, it is what it is. We got to pay for it. It's $1.23. Another city split it with us. They said, we'll accept half of that responsibility. I'm still in conversation with many others. One city said, well, it's our responsibility to pay for our residents' garbage. We do that. If commodities are not selling, that's not a recyclable product. That's a garbage product. And we pay tipping fees on garbage, so it's our responsibility to pay for the recycling product if there's a tipping fee.
So let me just make sure I understand. If we just cancel this, right? Just cancel recycling. That's my wife would be mad at me because she likes to recycle. But
that's because she thinks that
that's the problem. That's exactly right. Yeah. Would we, if we just canceled the contract, you would probably like that.
Well, no, we wouldn't like that.
Okay.
Because we are receiving a revenue off of the collection of that recycling. And we went into the contract with a collection revenue on recycling.
It hurts you on the revenue side.
It hurts us on the collection revenue side.
Yeah. But it benefits you on the expense side.
Yeah, to some extent, sure. Yeah. Where that delta is, I don't know right now.
Right,
but I do want to say, though, recycling is not being landfilled. I don't want anybody to think that.
Yeah, you're right.
They're just.
I didn't know that.
The processing. Now, there are certain products, if they can't sell it.
That's the struggle.
So, for instance, down in St. George, they had over 4,000 bales of recyclable materials that were just sitting at the separation facility. Well, it's a transfer station. Then they bring it up here and separate it. Well, the cardboard that they had pulled out and that they had baled got wet. So that had to be landfilled. So because they couldn't find a place to sell it in enough time. But things that are going in recycling, it's just taking so much longer, and it's taking more processing. They have to run it through the sorter, more times, because they have to get all of that contamination out. So they're not landfilling recycling product unless they can't sell it. And then at some point they'll say, we don't have any place to put it. But the materials, the MRFs, you guys all know what a MRF is. The MRFs they're just holding on to the product until they can find a buyer. And the buyers that were paying them X amount are now paying them very, very little. So, Rocky Mountain says that they lost, $2 or $3 million last quarter? Because what they were able to sell for $150 a ton, they're now selling for $30 a ton or whatever it is.
So how long are they going to keep that up?
I don't know. Not a whole lot of options.
Well, so, and maybe, I'll just throw out an idea. Thought about it yesterday. Until there is a solution, I wonder if in our waiting, we could provide some locations, and I know it ends up looking horrible, but have a couple of roll-offs around town, like at the pipe plant or, in parking lots where we have access, and until it's solved, maybe we just have locations where there's big, ginormous blue roll-off dumpsters where people can dump recyclables.
Does that help, or is it still?
Not on his collection.
No, you're still.
But-
you're still
We still have that contract. We have to uphold that.
For a year and a half.
Well, they have to uphold their contract with us.
For a year and a half.
They're required to deliver curbside recycling until June 30th, 2020,
Right.
according to the agreement.
Reese,
But
So 2 years.
I think there are options, and I think we as staff can sit down with Reese and we can list, I'm guessing 5 options, because off the top of my head, we just say, hey, we're going to write out the contract till 2020, then we'll renegotiate a price on the curbside and we'll keep going. Or at the end of 2020, we'll revamp our recycle and make it more of a, if you really want this service, here's going to be the price, and if you want to opt out at that point, you can opt out. Or if...
or renegotiate the contract now.
Well, and that's part of, I think, what Reese is asking is we'd rather have a solution in the next couple months as opposed to waiting almost 2 years because they're losing money on this deal.
Which is better for the city to negotiate, right?
Well, in our...
I think we'd be better off. You're in a position where we could probably negotiate a better deal long term, because if we wait for a year and a half and then try to negotiate, Reese is not going to be a happy boy.
No, but, and I don't
Right?
I don't want to negotiate this right now because we have options. We don't have to use
Right.
Republic Services.
That's right.
But all I'm saying is, if we renegotiate the contract now, the prices are going to go up.
Yep.
We can, or we can just, we can renegotiate the agreement. We can just willingly say, okay, we're going to help with some relief here moving forward. Because part of it is there going to be any relief from what has already happened? And as I've talked with other cities, most cities are not giving any relief from the past, and most are focusing from today moving forward. But I'm assuming even Reese is saying, look, as we move forward on this, a few more years of minus 65 is a big-time money loser. So their preference is we figure out. And if we're going to be a partner in this deal, then let's sit down and figure something out sooner rather than later. But, and if the agreement, if we get something figured out and we want to try something for a year or something like that, we can do that. I mean, we can control the terms of the contract and how long we want to do that. But what is likely going to come up is there could be a change in the service, or there's going to be a change in the price.
Right.
Well,
So those are going to be the two things.
or instead of
or
Still-
nothing, right?
well,
I mean,
it's either
ultimately we have a contract till
Well,
2020.
nothing for, until 2020.
Yeah.
And then
something's got to change.
something's going
that's what I was saying. It's either instead of opting out, it's going to be they're going to have their choice of opting in.
Well, no, it's
right?
whatever we as a city determine. We could just say we're not going to do the service anymore. It's just too expensive. Or we can say, look, citizens, if you really want this service, here's what it's going to charge. Because right now, people can opt out today.
And
I mean, we don't charge anymore to opt out of the program.
what's the percentages right now of doing recycling again in the city?
So 60, according to this, 67% right now are recycling.
Well, and I do like, I prefer opt-in, by the way.
So changing the model.
Changing
That
the
in
model.
essence, we could send a letter out to people and say, as of this date, here's the new price. And if you don't want to recycle anymore, we'll come pick up your can.
Right,
If you want to keep recycling,
opt-in.
here's the price. And that might be something more preferential to what they want to do, but they would want to do that sooner rather than waiting almost 2 years. Is that fair to say?
And by the way, I'm just going to state this out. I see us as partners. We cannot provide garbage service by ourselves.
No, we have to contract it.
We have to
Sure.
contract. I don't believe that we're going to get a better deal if we shop around because everybody's doing the same thing.
Well, no, and I think that's fair to say. I mean,
Costs are gonna be the same.
yeah,
So-
the costs are going to go up because the cost to provide the service for those that are providing it are going up. So the cost is going to be passed on to us. The question is how quickly we act. And so if it's okay with the council, we'll sit down with Reese and we'll craft the options with maybe not some guaranteed prices, but some ballpark prices, or maybe if we can get into a full-blown negotiation on this is what it looks like if we kind of do the opt-in model and only 30% are in, then here's what we're going to charge per can or whatever. Because we have what they're charging us, but then we also have what we charge the residents. So
Right.
there's things, all that stuff that we have to consider. As far as-
And I would love for the resident to be able to choose.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. I mean, they can choose now today. The thing is the price isn't changing.
right.
So eventually, once that price changes, we might have some people that are going to say, you know what, I'm okay not to recycle.
Well, or I might say, hey, I've had 2 cans and I'm okay with 1.
Sure.
So,
Or my wife may be willing to pay more because recycling is important.
And I think there will be people.
And
that
you
will
have no
absolutely do
choice
that.
in that, just like, just like me. If it's
the other thing
if
to
it's $20 a can,
It's what she's paying.
she'll just say, just write the check.
That's exactly
Anyway,
So Scott mentioned this, we're certainly not asking for any back money that we've had to pay for this. So don't think that. We're just talking about moving forward
Yeah.
on what we can do with that. I'd be more than, I kind of ran some vague numbers today.
Okay, so we can.
So I mean, we can sit down and do that and say, if it goes to your 67% now, if half of the people opted out, if you did a educational program and said you can opt out if you want to, whatever it is, you can't go to opt in now because you've already done it. So it would just be kind of a opt out on
I'm
steroids.
saying in the future, when there's a new price,
Yeah, but they'll already have a can, so essentially they would just be opting out.
Of the
Right, but it would be that, if it went half of what you're doing now, I mean, I kind of have a price for that type of thing, at least.
Okay.
We can
Rough.
make some options.
Good.
all right, that'll
Okay.
work. Thank you. You, council, you okay with that?
Yep.
We proceed that way? So, okay. All right, next item.
Next item is an update on the potential Parks and Recreation tax, on the sales tax. A little over a month ago, we put together a Parks and Recreation focus group to take a look at the viability of this tax. If it were to be voted on and approved by our citizens, how much would that generate? And what projects would we consider if that were to happen? So this group's met twice, just so you're aware of who's part of our Parks and Rec focus group. We have 5 residents. We have the mayor, 2 council members, Todd and Sid, Dion Giles, our Parks and Rec director, and myself. In those meetings, we have talked about what this would look like as far as if this were to happen and what projects would we be able to look at. If the tax were to be implemented, it's a 0.1% increase on the sales tax. So there's 2 ways I can describe this. One is for every $10 you spend in sales, on a sales tax, you're going to pay an extra penny. So our current sales tax.
And Scott, let's just be, so 10 cents or $10 for the tax, not the item.
No, $10 for the item.
So every $10 you pay, it's a penny
Yes.
tax.
Penny extra tax.
Okay.
So let me describe it this way. So our sales tax rate is currently 6.75%. So I go to McDonald's, I get the extra value meal, Decide I want to throw a fillet of fish on top of that, and so my bill is now $10. Not good for my health, but $10 is now my bill. Currently, I would pay 67.5 cents, and I don't know how they round up, because we're at 6.75%. But I pay sales tax on that.
Is this a real case scenario?
This
that-
could be. Maybe not today, but maybe in the
Scott
past.
has figured this out.
It's not healthy.
I know, but then you're gonna go play pickleball on the courts.
I'll work it all.
The
I'll
Parks and
work
Recs
that all
tax,
off.
yeah. Wait,
Let's
go
keep,
back.
hold on,
So-
let's keep going. Go ahead.
Sorry.
So right now I pay 67.5 cents. So my bill is $10.67. Again, I don't know how they round up or round down on the 0.5. So if this goes into effect, then instead of paying 67.5 cents, I'll now pay 68.5 cents on that $10 purchase. So my tax, instead of paying $10.67 total, will now be $10.68 total.
And that 1 penny goes towards,
So the 1 penny now is going to come back and go into a special fund collected by the state and then given to the city. And the city is required by law to spend it on parks, recreation, cultural arts types of things. Different cities have imposed this and call it different names. In American Fork, they call it the park tax. Most cities, just the general name is RAP, Recreation, Arts, and Parks, RAP tax. Orem calls it the CARE tax. In fact, our focus group came up with a name, and CARE tax is what they settled on, a different acronym than what Orem has, but they wanted to put a name to it, so when people were voting on it, they understood when they heard CARE tax what that meant and what that stood for. And so we've put together the ballot language. Now, when the council did a resolution to the county commissioners with our intent to do this, we took that resolution and submitted it to the state to have this on the ballot. So that's all been approved. We are now on the ballot.
Scott, why don't you talk about why you had to do that to the county?
Okay, thank you. According to state law, the county gets the first right to do this type of tax. So in Weber County, where I came from before I was here, Weber County had a RAP tax. They called it RAMP because they threw in museums as part of it. And so that tax was collected countywide, and then they had a group of people that determined how much a city was going to get or an organization or whatever, and then they doled out the money. Well, in Utah County has not imposed this tax as a county, and so individual cities have a right to impose the tax. Again, it's voted on by the people, it has to be approved by the people. But we have to check with the county first, so we checked with them and said, here's our intent. They said, we are not intending on doing this, so as a city, if you would like to pursue it, go ahead. So,
And Scott, what cities around us have that tax?
to our knowledge, Orem, Cedar Hills, Linden, American Fork, Provo, Spanish Fork, I think, is considering it this year. Who's that? Lehigh does not.
So in other words, we're missing out.
Well, I think when you look, it depends on how you look at it, but if I go to American Fork McDonald's and spend my $10, then they're getting my 1 cent, and that's going to their rec programs or their parks programs or whatever, which I do. I mean, I've
All
eaten
of us
in
do.
American
All of
Fork
us do.
before, and so, or I've shopped there before, and so I'm helping fund their programs. Well, if all of our neighbors have this and we don't, we are missing out on capturing outside revenue from other people that are not our residents to help fund these programs, these facilities. Now, it's still a tax, and our residents will pay it if they buy something in our community. They will pay that tax. If we're shopping in our neighboring communities, we're already paying that tax. We're just not seeing the benefit as residents of Pleasant Grove. So, I mean, that shouldn't be the main reason we do this, but that is just something out there that I think we need to consider, that if these are facilities that we want to provide, if these are facilities that our residents have said, how come we don't have pickleball courts? We can now turn around and say, well, there's a way to fund them, and here's the mechanism to do that. So the focus group is the group that sat down and said, well, let's talk about what facilities we would provide. And because this tax over 10 years, once it's implemented, you collect it for 10 years and then it goes back up for another vote. So in 10 years, we would generate roughly $3.25 million. Now,
Second, what was the acronym that they decided on, and what?
CARE.
No, CARE, but what were the words? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Sid. You can remember this better than me. Enhanced, I thought.
I'm sorry,
Enhanced.
enhanced.
The E is
Enhanced.
enhanced.
Enhancement.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the $325,000 was probably our baseline. Anticipating new businesses coming into town, new sales tax generators, that number will increase over the year. Now, over the years, over the 10 years. Now, as we calculate and as we do things as staff, we want to stay on the conservative end, so we've kind of modeled everything after $325,000 a year. So if the what the focus group talked about was, let's commit the first 4 years worth of funds to specific projects, so that when people vote, they know exactly what that money is going to go to for the first 4 years. And so the first 4 years would generate about $1.3 million. And then we looked at some specific projects, and we had some cost estimates that are tied to these projects. And we said, okay, group, which one do you think would be the most beneficial to our community as far as the services provided? Because let me give you an example of something that we talked about would be like a bubble over the swim pool. Well, the cost of that, and including the operations cost, that would gobble up like most of the money for one project. And so we had a discussion about, I mean, are we just going to do one big one, or do we want to kind of do things to enhance some parks, maybe some pickleball courts, maybe some other things? And that's why we turn to our citizens and say, you know, what do you want? What are some facilities that you think our community needs? And so what they came back with were pickleball courts, outdoor pickleball courts. So we already have the indoor stuff. We use our gyms in the winter, and we run indoor pickleball, and very successful. And we've had residents approach us and say, well, what about outdoor pickleball courts? And right now our response has been, we don't have the funds to do that. So this opens up that window. We also have Discovery Park, which is scheduled for a remodel next year, and really a complete rebuild of that park. And that park is going to be a group effort. There's going to be some private money involved. We would use, if we were to fund part of it as a city, we would use this money, because it's already needs to be earmarked for Parks and Recreation, so we would use that money for that. And then there's a county grant we're seeking that would hopefully cover a part of that. But that's something that, as people look at it, they'd say, okay, that's something that's interesting to me. We also want to redo our downtown park. As we finish the building out here, we need a new pavilion. We're already doing new restrooms as part of the project, and we need a new playground. And so we would need some money to do that. So that would also be part of it. We've talked about one of the needs in the community is upgrading our baseball facilities, and this can mean different things, but one of the things we talked about, shade covers or batting cages, or things that would be, I mean, we have Shannon Fields, and we also have the Manila Park where we have baseball fields, that we could use this money to make that experience a little better as far as complementary facilities. We've also talked about upgrading some fitness equipment in the rec center as part of that. And then also doing a, you know where the mushroom is in our swim pool, that zero entry, and we have that little mushroom, replacing that with something maybe a little bigger and better that I think would attract more people to come and use our swim pool. So those are the projects that we talked about. And when we put the ballot language together, and I'll just read you what it says. It says, shall Pleasant Grove City be authorized to impose a 0.1% sales and use tax, and then we have CARE in parentheses, to fund parks and recreation facilities and cultural arts programs, i.e. outdoor pickleball courts, remodeling Discovery Park, redevelopment of the downtown park, batting cages and baseball field upgrades, fitness equipment and swimming pool features, and then we added, and additional future projects. So the ballot language is going to commit the first 4 years of funds. It doesn't say that as part of the informational material that we will send out. It will be, we'll say this is what we commit to do in the first 4 years. But then we'll have 6 years worth of money that, you know, in 2 years we'll sit down and say, okay, you know, what do we want to do with this? And gives us a little bit more time to plan. If we want to do a little bit bigger project, we can have that discussion. or however we want to do that. And I forgot to mention also what the focus group wanted was to set aside a specific amount of dollars for arts programs every year. And so what that number is, we haven't necessarily fully decided, and ultimately the city council is going to decide what that number is. But that will be part of the funding on a yearly basis so that we can use it for that, and we'll want to use some of that for the arts programs to help them with what they need to do. I think that covers. I'm going to have Tina talk about the timeline moving forward from today up until this is on the ballot in November. We've been given a proposition number. It's proposition number 8, what it's going to be called. So any questions for me before we have Tina come up?
I do have a question.
Yep.
So does this become like an enterprise fund where, and is there any restrictions on, because I could see some broad
Yeah, so Denise
definitions.
isn't here, but it is earmarked money. My guess is it would be more of a special revenue fund.
Okay.
Because it's an enterprise fund would suggest that there is a fee we're
Fee.
charging
Right.
to provide the service. But no, it will be specifically earmarked to make sure that it's spent in a certain manner. We get audited every year, and so they'll make sure that that money's being spent
Okay.
on what it should be. But how exactly that looks like on the balance sheet,
Okay.
Denise will need to answer that.
And is there any way to say on the ballot that it's 1 penny for $10? Because I thought you said that it was the point.
I don't know. I think we've already
0.01.
turned our ballot language in.
0.1%, but people need to be able to calculate that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I think in the informational material we send out,
Yeah.
And I think
we'll
that
make
has
that
to be-
clear to people. It's 1 cent on $10.
Because I remember distinctly a ballot initiative in American Fork that was 1 penny on a $10 bill. And it was, the little yard signs said 10%. You know, you're going to get raised 10%. So I want to make sure that that is very, very clear that it's $10, 1 penny.
So we can make that clear.
Yes.
What others choose to put on their signs, we don't control. But
I
and
just
that
wanna make
was
sure
for
it's
their
clear.
that was for their park tax.
Well, we
It
just
was.
need
When
it
that came
clear, and we need the citizens to understand and not be deceived that it's not a, it's not a.
How we do our public.
Yeah, this is a very, very small tax that other cities are doing. We're missing out, and we need the funds.
And this focus group, our next meeting is going to be talking about that informational material and the flyer that we're going to put together so people know. There will be eventually a voter information pamphlet, and Tina will talk about that on the timeline. And then if there's an advocacy group that's going to go out and buy yard signs, that's going to be up to them. But as a city, we don't control that.
Thank you, Scott. Anything else for Scott? If not,
Okay.
Tina.
So Kathy, as the city recorder, has a lot of duties involved with a ballot initiative or an opinion question. So she and I went through the statute and put together a timeline of what needs to happen from here. I would just like to note that this is a little bit different in that it is an opinion question. We're asking the residents for their opinion. We're not actually enacting anything at that time when the election results come in. You will still need to pass an ordinance actually enacting the tax. So I just want to make sure that's clear. So Kathy has already begun advertising for arguments for and against the ballot proposition, and citizens can submit a request to Kathy by August 31st before 11 a.m. So any citizen who wants to write an argument for the ballot proposition, or any citizen that wants to write an argument against the ballot proposition, has to file a request with the city recorder first
By that date.
by that date and time.
And is there a word limit?
Well, I'll get to that. So this is just a request. This is not the arguments. This is
Okay.
just saying, hi, city recorder, my name is blank and I would like to write an argument against or for. Then by September 7th, the arguments do have to be submitted. They can only be 500 words in length, and the argument cannot list more than 5 names as sponsors. Then before September 10th, the election officer, which is Kathy, will send the arguments that she received, both pro and con, to the opposite sides, and then they will have an opportunity to write a rebuttal. And the rebuttals will be due September 21st before 11 a.m. And then the voter information pamphlet needs to be prepared, and there is also a deadline for that, and that will be prepared and sent out sometime between September 25th and no later than September 28th. And then by October 1st, it'll be sent out to the printers. And I think that that's probably all you need to know. We have some other noticing requirements that are just mostly technical in nature, sort of just our responsibility to make sure they get done. And then also we have to have a public meeting prior to the election day, no more than 45 days, but at least 4 days before the election day. And so right now we're anticipating that meeting would be held on either October 23rd or October 30th, which would be regular city council Tuesdays. Oh, the 23rd. So that's the time frame, and then the general election is on November 6th, and the canvass will be on November 20th. Questions about that? Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll now move to our first item. Scott, do you want to review our agenda for this evening for our council meeting?
Just a couple of things of note for tonight. We are anticipating the appointment of Mike Roberts as our interim chief of police. For those who are not aware, our current chief, Mike Smith, was sworn in today as the new sheriff of Utah County. So the council, well, it's a mayoral appointment with advice and consent of the council to appoint an interim chief. The intent is to have an open search for this position, and we'll actually be putting that out tomorrow and getting that process started. We're hoping that as we work through this process, that we can have somebody in place before the end of the year. And internal candidates can apply, external candidates can apply. So we're going to have it open for 3 weeks, and we'll see. So at that point, the mayor and I can work on what the first round of interviews and things will look like. In the past, we've handled that with a couple of the administrative team and the mayor, and then we narrow it down to 2, 3, 4 candidates, and then we have them interview with the city council. That's the model that we hold on to. So
Your timing is apropos. Mike Smith just sent us his letter of resignation.
okay, he did.
So
Like
just
as-
came in. It'll be big shoes to fill.
Yes. No, and we're excited to move
Got
forward.
Denied.
We have a lot of confidence in Mike, so we're not worried at all about the interim, but just so you know. And we'll do actually a swearing in. He'll be sworn in as the interim chief. So
Did you know that, Mike? I don't know if you want to have
found out
anybody
about
else.
5 minutes before the
Oh,
meeting.
okay. That's good.
Call your wife. Get your family down here.
We didn't know that this was, when we talked about it in director's meeting at 2 o'clock, we had that discussion. Is that something that would be sworn in or not? And we just said, it'd probably be nice. Let's swear him in.
Is that before or after the bomb squad was happening?
Yeah, I think he was right in the middle of the bomb squad stuff. And so that's where we're at. Item 9A is a public hearing for what we call the Larry Myler project. We're going to ask for that to be continued indefinitely. We are continuing working through the development agreement with them, which is actually item 10B. We'll ask that to be continued as well, not date certain. There's a lot of moving parts on this project and a lot of asks from the developer, and we're still hammering through details on that. So we hope to have it resolved soon, but I'd hate to continue it for 2 weeks from now, and we're still not there. So. And then 10A is the authorization, a request from the new Hyatt House Hotel for a full-service restaurant liquor license and an on-premise banquet liquor license. So they have to have city approval before they go to the state to get that, if I remember that right. And Tina will go over that. Item C is the request to remove a median on Pleasant Grove Boulevard in order to accommodate a development which is going to be partially, part of it's going to be a credit union and the other part will be retail. When we get to that item, I'll put up something on the screen here so that you can take a look at that. We've been working with the owners of the property for the last, well, they met with us down at ICSC in May. That's what kind of kicked it off. Marty and I and whoever else has been involved as we've been working with them to see if there's a way that makes sense for us. So as we look at it, if we're ever going to see retail on that property, we feel that median probably should be removed. But we'll talk about the details of that when we get into that on 10C. And then 10D is just a subdivision plat approval for a 21-lot subdivision, rural residential, kind of in the north part of town. We will need an executive session to discuss a legal matter after that, but that's it for the agenda tonight. Do we have any questions? Okay, I think we're done. Well, yeah,
we go ahead and, let's
go ahead and end. And
now I'd like to request a motion to adjourn for the next 10 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Have a second adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned for till 6 o'clock.